Hello, I'm Dr. Robin Miller, and you're watching HealthDay's conference coverage exploring research with the world's leading medical professionals. Digestive Disease Week was hosted from May 6th to the 9th in Chicago, Illinois, where experts gathered to present advances in gastroenterology. For more details and highlights from the week, I'm pleased to have Dr. Prateek Sharma join us to share his impressions of the conference. Dr. Sharma is a professor of medicine at the University of Kansas School of Medicine. Dr. Sharma, thank you for your time.
Well, glad to be here, Robin.
So there were many significant studies presented during the week. Which stood out to you as potentially practice-changing for a physician in everyday practice?
And I think one was looking at, again, going back to the obesity theme, is the impact of obesity surgery on not just the markers of obesity and weight loss, but also maybe potential reduction in cancer, for example, right? So, I mean, that's something which stood out. Novel endoscopic ways to treat, type 2 diabetes, which again is related to obesity. And then the other thing, which again with a little bit of bias there, is a study from our unit which looked at how much waste we generate from procedures that we do on an ongoing basis. So this theme about green endoscopy or improving the environment. So those are some of the ones which stood out for me.
So in an early stage study, 14 patients underwent an endoscopic procedure in which alternating electrical pulses were delivered to the duodenum. Patients then began taking semaglutide regularly. According to the researchers, the procedure could be disease-modifying, as it was shown to allow patients with type 2 diabetes to stop taking insulin and still maintain glycemic control. What are the advantages of this intervention method as opposed to taking semaglutide alone for type 2 diabetes?
The initial part of the duodenum is where we think the resistance to insulin happens. And insulin resistance, as you know, is a major factor in type 2 diabetes. So therefore, investigators for the last decade or so, I would say, in the field of gastroenterology have been looking at, can we resurface that lining of the mucosa of the duodenum, and can that impact type 2 diabetes?
So are there any risks to the procedure?
Whenever you try to injure or cause any damage to the lining of the mucosa of the duodenum, the concern always is, if you go in too deep, can you cause deep injury to the lining of the mucosa? Will there be stenosis or strictures associated with it? If it's very deep, can there be a leakage or minor perforation which can be associated with that? Doesn't seem like this from my understanding of this technique. It's quite superficial. But again, those would be potential risks, or at least serious risks, that need to be addressed in future trials.
So in a study of patients with obesity who underwent bariatric surgery, researchers found that just 4% developed obesity-associated cancer within 10 years, compared to 8.9% of patients with obesity who did not undergo a weight loss procedure. The researchers say this study adds to evidence that weight loss associated with bariatric surgery may have a protective effect against cancer formation. How exactly is bariatric surgery reducing cancer risk? And is it simply due to weight loss, or could there be something else at work?
As you know, a number of cancers, including breast cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, have been linked to obesity. And the hypothesis behind that is that obesity, as we know, is like a chronic inflammatory condition. It causes, dysregulation of hormones like insulin, like estrogen, which can play a role in carcinogenesis, leading to proliferation of cells. So if that is how maybe obesity causes cancer, if you reduce that inflammation, right? I mean, if you get rid of that driving force which is causing this hormonal imbalance, maybe you can reverse part of that process, or you can prevent that process from happening.
Lastly, your team of researchers collected data on waste from 450 consecutive procedures at a large academic endoscopy unit from May to June 2022 to study the environmental impact of waste generation and energy consumption from GI procedures. Of the over 3,000 pounds of waste generated during the study period, 20% was recyclable. The researchers suggest that a recycling program could reduce the waste going to landfills by 6,000 pounds, or more than 2.5 tons per year. How could this data set the stage for actions so that health systems can establish more environmentally sustainable endoscopy units?
Yeah, no, thank you, Robin. And, of course, I'm a little bit biased because this study is from our unit. But I think the background for doing this was, that COVID period in which we were using multiple gowns, multiple shields, multiple gloves, again, for good reason, right? So, I mean, it's not that there was any problem with that, but that sort of just opened our eyes to the fact that, when we do procedures, which, by the way, are necessary, right? I mean, because these are, screening procedures for cancer. This is to remove lesions, right? So these are important procedures, but what's the downstream effect of when we do all of that? So that was the genesis for us, looking at this. So this sets the stage. It provides us with a baseline that, hey, how much are we actually utilizing during these procedures? So it's not to say that the procedure should not be done, but it's just raising awareness. And then to your question, telling us that, hey, if there are 20 to 30% of these recyclable items, why are we sending them to the landfill, right? Shouldn't we start programs of recycling, as you and I do in our houses, right? We have the recyclable bin and we have the trash bin, right? So similarly, in healthcare systems, not just in endoscopy. I think this is to increase awareness and tell folks that as healthcare professionals, we are equally responsible for protecting the environment. So opening everyone's eyes and then figuring out what each one of us can do in a small bit in our own respective institutions, which I think will go a long ways towards improving the environment.
Well, Dr. Sharma, thank you for your time today. You've been watching HealthDay's conference coverage. Thank you.